I think a lot of people still feel alone.
As simple as it is, mental health is just health, man. And if you're not healthy, you're unhealthy.
How do you actually take time to kind of slow things down? I've never felt so stretched ever in my life.
I think the world needs to understand how challenging this last couple of years has been on first responders, and not just fire department personnel, but police officers, nurses, doctors, mental health therapists. I can only speak for the fire department, but guys on the job are hurting. They're being asked to work more and more into 48, 72, 96-hour shifts. Just ran into a guy the other day, a friend of mine who worked 120 hours. It's 5 days straight. I was 28 years old, and I just felt like I wasn't doing enough, to be honest with you. I felt like there was more in me to give, and I didn't know what that meant. And I felt like working 3 jobs and that routine wasn't very conducive to me figuring that out deliberately, right? So I left all 3 of my jobs in good standing, and I went to Brazil. Bit of a crazy story, but I was put in a position where I was able to save a girl from serious harm or possibly death. And when I reflected back on that, I think it made me aware that this is who I've always been. I've always been the guy that would pull over on the side of the road if he saw someone's vehicle was down, or someone was laying down in a supermarket. I was the first one to rush over there and try to help out. It became very clear to me that I needed a change of career path, and what most completely embodied that pursuit, in my opinion, was the fire service.
I don't really remember having a lot of exposure or a conversation or anything about mental health until my brother began to experience challenges.
2 lakes rest on one another, the image of the joyous. Thus, the superior man joins with friends for discussion and practice. Talk to her. Try to understand where she's coming from.
The foundation is named after my brother, actor Lee Thompson Young, so it's called the Lee Thompson Young Foundation, and I created it along with my mom in 2014 after losing my brother to suicide. He suffered in silence with bipolar disorder, and one of the main things that my mom and I want to do is to help erase the stigma associated with mental illness and really promote mental health education. When you're going through it yourself, I still feel like people feel like they are experiencing something that no one else is, right? And that maybe no one can help them, or maybe, there's something that they're doing wrong, right? But that stigma that you can just pray about it, that's one of the things, right? You can pray about it, or you can just choose differently, and it's not that simple. I feel like the brain, although it's an organ, people treat it differently than other organs in the body. It's looked at differently because it's thought of as something to deal with the mind. And I feel like as a culture, we think you should be able to control your mind. So you just don't even get the same empathy that you would get if you have a heart condition, or you have cancer, or some other medical condition.
Some of the various things that we see in terms of mental health issues are on a spectrum. So some are very light, where some are very moderate to severe. Some signs we may look for: someone experiencing depression might be making thoughts of not wanting to be here, maybe giving some items away, really sad all the time, really angry all the time, frustrated, limited sleep, limited eating. On the anxiety spectrum, constant worrying, someone who's fidgety, always thinking that someone's out to get them in some way, shape, or fashion. They're worried about what's coming next. They just can't be present in the moment. For bipolar, their mood or affect changes to extreme on a regular basis. For 3 weeks of the month, they might be calm, cool, and then there's 1 week where they're taking a lot of risk, a lot of gambling. Maybe there's sex, maybe there's drug use. And after that period, they kind of switch back. So it falls everything in between. You don't need an official diagnosis to necessarily have a mental health issue.
Mental health isn't always, oh, you have something mentally wrong with you. It's where are you in terms of your stability? Where are you in terms of your ability to process things? And stress and being stressed and worrying about things, that affects your mental capacity. Your mental ability is there. You're a sane person, but you're getting stressed to the point where you're not thinking like yourself.
I'd say the biggest pressure that most students feel is the one that we see student departure with the most, and that's being away from home. That ends up being, for many students, the biggest pressure that's difficult for them to deal with. If you've been on a college campus long enough, you'll hear about, suicide in students, right? Some of the commitments that students make when they're on campus end up being triggers, right? So if you make a commitment to yourself that I'm going to get an A in this class, and a relatively unimportant quiz comes up, but trying to, manage and juggle all of these commitments that they've made to themselves, that ends up being a trigger, and for some students, it could take them into horrible episodes.
I went to the University of Virginia. I had been playing softball ever since I was 4 years old and had really developed into a good softball player. I remember that first season, I probably went for what felt like 100 at-bats. And I was just mentally low. This isn't, my best performance. How am I ever gonna get out of this? This sucks. I remember we were down playing South Carolina, University of South Carolina. I was in that for whatever slump, and I happened to make contact at the very end of my bat with the ball, and it kind of dribbled into the field. And I sped to first base, and I was safe, and it was a hit. And then a ball got hit to me, and I made a diving catch, and I caught it. And then it just broke, right? So that slump all of a sudden just ended. Playing softball, that was the lesson for me, which is that every time you step to the plate, every time you wake up in the morning, it's actually a whole new opportunity. What you did before in that prior at bat has no bearing on what you're gonna do next.
Got a scholarship to USC, Southern California, and played ball for a while, got injured, concussions, really broke my heart. And I remember a conversation with my grandmother, and I told her one night, I feel like a failure. And she cussed me out, literally cursed me out, and said, you're somewhere none of us have ever been. You're someone who's always cared for people. You still love your art. You still love writing. You can do that all the time. It doesn't matter where you are. Just graduate. That's all she said. She was just just graduate.
What drew me to education was, and still is, students. I think teaching and learning is one of the most important aspects of humanity, right? The things that we value and are important to who we are as humans, we pass that along to the next generation, and then they do the same. How you can leave a legacy here on earth begins and ends with education.
Gunshot wound, stabbing, vehicle versus pedestrian, full arrest, fire. All these calls take a toll on our overall mental health. Real trauma that you can't etch out of your mind. I see death almost every shift. 12 to 15 times a month, sometimes multiple times a day. The old woman in hospice care, 96 years old, lived a good life, it was her time. Someone who unfortunately saw no other way out and put a shotgun in their mouth. A 24-year-old mother fell asleep while breastfeeding her child and suffocated her. Woke up and the baby's blue. And that's tough to process. So, yeah, we see it a fair amount. Yeah, we see it a fair amount.
A lot of times when we're actually given the space to take a breath and to just contemplate and to reflect and to say, all right, this is where I am right now, it allows us to kind of think beyond our circumstances, or in spite sometimes, many times, of our circumstances. And that opens people up to a lot of different things. I just wish we had more of those opportunities without needing to be institutionalized or prisoned or housed or held.
So I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, not far from the Rodney King riots, and I noticed just living in my neighborhood, there were a number of people who we kind of shunned as a community. We said, oh, don't talk to that person, they'll come over here, we don't want any problems. And so we isolated them where we should actually be embracing those folks. When I was in high school, I was homeless for a couple years. So there were a lot of things that I experienced in my youth that I wasn't able to talk about. And I didn't have that person to sit me down, kind of help me sort these different emotions, feelings, and thoughts out. So it was a tough time, and I wanted to take this opportunity to be that person for someone else.
As it pertains to me as a father, I'm concerned about my mental health. I'm concerned about my warm heart. I feel like I came into this job with a warm heart, and that's something that I want to protect. But call volume, sleep deprivation, traumatic images starts to chip away at that.
Rock with daddy, I got you.
I think it is incumbent and important upon every firefighter to make a deliberate effort to fight that, if not for themselves, for their family, who have to deal with them.
America could fully address mental health by really putting their money where their mouth is in terms of this topic. We really need to fund these programs that are providing mental health services. We need to make sure that we are making mental health providers actually feel heard, actually feel safe in the environments in which they work in. And we need to create a pipeline for more people to join the mental health ranks.
I hope one day we get to the point where not everything someone does that is despicable, even, not everything that someone does that you look at and you go, well, that was irrational, that we don't automatically either go, that's an evil person, or that person has something mentally wrong with them. It goes deeper than that. There's so many more webbings that go on with people that you can't blanket those statements on folks.
There is no health without mental health. Mental health is the foundation for any type of success that you want to achieve in life or sustain. You need that mental health foundation to be strong.
The moment we start being really attentive to mental health awareness, I think, is when we start treating each other better as a community and start moving forward as a society in the direction I think we'd all like to go.
Self-care.
Community.
Curiosity.
Sanctuary.
Love.
Can't nobody love you like you love yourself. Go on and love yourself.